The night was a shroud of quiet in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Only the soft hum of traffic lights, cycling from red to green, broke the silence. Elias Vance, a sharp assistant district attorney, was lost in thought, the day's legal battles fading as he drove home. Then the flashing red and blue lights painted his rearview mirror. He sighed, pulled over and reached for his wallet. No reason for a stop, he thought, but reason often had little to do with it. 2 officers approached. Officer Miller, tall and imposing, stood at his window, while Officer Hayes, leaner but just as stern, flanked the passenger door. License and registration, Miller's voice clipped. Elias handed over his documents. May I ask why I was stopped? Your taillight's out, Miller replied, his gaze flickering. Elias frowned. A lot. His car had just passed inspection. Are you sure about that? He asked, keeping his voice even. Miller's expression hardened. Sir, step out of the vehicle. A slow dread crept through Elias. He'd seen this script before. I'm not stepping out until you tell me why. Hayes smirked, his hand resting on his belt. Because we said so. Elias took a breath. He knew the law. I'm within my rights to ask why I'm being ordered out of my car. Miller's patience snapped. He yanked the door open. Step out now. Before Elias could react, Miller grabbed his wrist, yanking him forward. The seatbelt dug into his shoulder. What the hell are you doing? Elias barked, pulling back instinctively. Within seconds, Hayes was on the other side, wrenching Elias's arm behind his back, metal cuffs biting into his skin. You're resisting, Miller said coldly. Elias stared in disbelief as Hayes pressed him against his own car. His heart pounded, not from fear but from a simmering rage. They thought they had him. They were about to realize how wrong they were. The courtroom was packed, a palpable tension beneath the usual hum of activity. Elias Vance sat at the defense table, his posture rigid. He was no longer an attorney, he was the accused. The charges, resisting arrest, obstruction, disorderly conduct, were blatant fabrications. Judge Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her uncompromising nature, barely looked at him. Elias knew this was going to be an uphill battle. Prosecutor Davis, oozing confidence, addressed the court. Your Honor, this is a simple case of an individual escalating a routine traffic stop into a physical altercation with law enforcement. He gestured towards Miller and Hayes, sitting smugly at the witness stand. The defendant refused to comply with officers' lawful orders, became aggressive, and had to be restrained for the safety of all involved. Elias's lawyer, a tired public defender named Sarah Chin, shot up. Objection. There is zero evidence my client was aggressive. Overruled, Judge Vance stated without hesitation. Chin sighed but pressed on. Your Honor, the officers escalated the situation without just cause. There is no body cam footage showing my client acting aggressively, because no such footage exists. Davis smirked. Body cams were not operational at the time of the arrest. But the officers' statements are more than enough evidence. Your Honor, Chin conceded, the defense calls Elias Vance to the stand. This was it. As Elias walked to the witness stand, every eye in the room was on him. He wasn't here to defend himself, he was here to expose the truth. Elias sat in the witness chair, exhaling slowly as the clerk swore him in. Prosecutor Davis began his questioning, pacing in a display of unnecessary confidence. Mr. Vance, would you say you complied with the officer's instructions during your traffic stop? I asked why I was being ordered out of my car, Elias replied calmly. That's not illegal. Davis feigned a sigh. You refused to exit, correct? I asked why I was being asked to step out, Elias repeated, which legally I have the right to do. Davis turned to the jury, shaking his head. And after multiple orders, you still didn't comply? Elias held his stare. Because there was no lawful reason to. Davis moved to turn to the judge, but Elias leaned forward, his voice cutting through the air. Before we go any further, I should probably disclose something. Silence. Davis hesitated. Even Judge Vance looked up, truly seeing Elias for the first time. Elias reached into his briefcase. Sarah Chin tensed, unsure. Slowly, Elias pulled out his badge. A small, simple rectangle that had suddenly become the most dangerous thing in this courtroom. I'm Elias Vance, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Assistant District Attorney for the Southern District. The room froze. Judge Vance's lips parted slightly, her gavel hovering. The officers stiffened. Hayes's knee bounced under the table, Miller's jaw went tight. Davis's face went pale. Excuse me? Elias tilted his head. Did I stutter? The air shifted. The jury leaned forward. Even Sarah Chen looked like she'd been hit by a freight train. "You're a federal prosecutor?" Davis's voice wavered. Elias lifted his ID. "That's what this says, doesn't it?" Just like that, the entire case imploded. Judge Vance leaned back, her mouth a thin line. She knew if she ruled against Elias now, if she sided with these officers, it wouldn't just be another forgotten case. It would be a scandal. The courtroom was a powder keg and Elias had just lit the fuse. Judge Vance's grip on her gavel tightened, but she didn't slam it down. Not yet. She was calculating. Davis swallowed hard, his arrogance gone. He turned to the officers. For the first time, Miller and Hayes looked genuinely nervous. Elias watched the silent scramble for control. He'd seen it 100 times. I wasn't aware of this information," Davis stammered. Judge Vance raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes locked onto Elias's. "Driscoll, Kessler," she said, addressing the officers. "Would you like to amend your statements?" Silence. A crack in their composure. Elias spoke first. "Before they answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to request that the court pull the dispatch call logs from the night of my arrest." Davis flinched. Judge Vance studied Elias for a long moment. She was trapped. "Request granted." She cleared her throat. Miller exhaled sharply, his composure finally cracking. Hayes shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched. They knew. Elias leaned back. He wasn't finished. The story exploded. A young reporter in the courtroom, furiously typing, unleashed it. Within hours, Elias's name was everywhere. Assistant DA wrongfully arrested by corrupt cops. Federal prosecutor exposes police misconduct. The moment Elias revealed his badge became a viral video. Cable news ran segments asking how many others had been railroaded without the power to fight back. In Baton Rouge, community activists organized rallies. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, demanding accountability. Civil rights attorneys dug into old cases handled by Judge Vance, looking for patterns of bias. Then the real blow landed, an anonymous leak of internal police records and emails, discussing how to justify questionable stops, and statements from other black drivers threatened with arrest for arguing false violations. This wasn't just about Elias Vance anymore. It was about a system operating in the dark. The city scrambled. The police department issued a carefully worded, performative statement. Judge Vance's office stopped returning calls. By week's end, an internal investigation was announced, but the pressure kept building. A federal lawsuit was filed on behalf of past victims. Community leaders demanded Judge Vance's removal. Protesters refused to back down. Then the case was handed over to Louisiana's Attorney General for review. Elias watched the press conference from his apartment, his phone buzzing with calls from journalists and people who had been through exactly what he had, but without the badge to fight back. They were running out of ways to hide. Judge Vance knew it. By the time Elias returned to court for the verdict, Judge Vance's expression had changed. No more casual disinterest, no more overconfidence. She was staring at a case too big to bury. She had to decide which side of history she wanted to land on. The courtroom was silent. Judge Vance cleared her throat, the weight of the past few weeks heavy on her. "After reviewing the evidence," she began, setting her gavel down softly, "the court finds the defendant." She hesitated, then finally, "not guilty." A wave of relief crashed through Elias, but he didn't move. The officers sat stiffly, their faces pale. Miller leaned forward. "Your Honor, she held up a hand. "The court will also be forwarding all relevant materials to the state attorney's office for further review." That was it. The officers weren't walking away. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and gasps. Reporters' keyboards clicked furiously. For the first time, the system had turned its gaze back on itself. Elias stood slowly, his lawyer patting his back. But his eyes were on the officers, on Prosecutor Davis, who looked utterly defeated, and on the judge who had spent years dismissing cases like his until she was forced to do otherwise. Most of all, he thought about the people who weren't in this room, the ones who never got to walk free. As he stepped out, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, people cheered. But Elias wasn't celebrating. This wasn't a victory, it was proof. Proof of what had always been happening, but only now, with the world watching, had the system been forced to react. He knew the fight wasn't over. Not for him, not for the people still trapped in it. He stepped past the flashing lights and into the crowd, where voices demanded real change. Because one case wasn't enough. And now nobody was looking away. If this story made you think even for a second, then it's time to ask yourself, how many more stories like this are out there? How many people never get their moment in court, Their names never make the news, their truth never gets heard. It's not enough to just see injustice, we have to challenge it. So, if you believe that real justice means holding power accountable, then share this story, talk about it, pay attention. Because the more people who refuse to look away, the harder it becomes for these cases to be swept under the rug. And that's how change begins.